All right, so looks like someone's getting ready for some serious negotiations.
Yeah.
Based on these notes from Brent's workshop.
Ooh, Brent's workshop.
Yeah. Maybe a job offer, maybe a big purchase, who knows?
All right.
But whatever it is, we're diving deep into negotiation tactics today.
I have to say Brent has a really interesting approach, you know?
Yeah.
Starting the workshop off,
Okay.
asking people to define negotiation, gets people thinking right away.
Yeah, it definitely sets the stage to understand it more. So in his notes, he actually provides two different definitions of negotiation.
Okay.
First, he talks about how it's a dialogue between people
Yeah.
with the goal of reaching a solution everyone agrees on,
Right.
because each side has something the other wants.
Yeah. And the other definition really focuses on that back and forth communication process, right?
Yeah.
People exploring different options so they can ultimately find solutions that work for everyone.
Yeah.
Really highlights how dynamic negotiation can be.
For sure. So think about how you would define negotiation. What does it mean to you? What experiences have shaped your view of negotiation? Keep that in mind as we go, because your personal definition is a great foundation.
Absolutely. Now let's dig into one of the most important concepts in negotiation. It's called BATNA.
BTNA.
Best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Think of it as your safety net, your backup plan.
So it's what you'll do if the negotiation doesn't go your way.
Exactly. A strong BATNA is like having a secret weapon in your back pocket.
Okay.
Gives you confidence and leverage. Because you know you have a good alternative if the deal falls through.
Okay, that makes sense. How do you actually make your BTNA stronger?
That's a great question. It depends on the situation, of course.
All right.
Let's stick with the used car example from Brent's notes.
All right.
Let's say you find a car you love
Okay.
for $10,000, but then you find a similar car at another dealership for $8,500.
Oh.
Maybe not your dream car,
Yeah.
but a solid option.
So in that case, the $8,500 car is your BTNA.
Exactly. Knowing you have that option gives you more power to negotiate the price of the $10,000 car.
Right.
But if that second car wasn't available, your BATNA would be much weaker.
Right.
You'd probably feel less confident
Yeah.
about pushing for a lower price.
So having options is key.
Yes.
It's not just about knowing your walkaway point, but also about actively creating a stronger fallback position.
Exactly.
I like that.
And the stronger your BATNA, the less likely you are to settle for an agreement that's not truly in your best interest. It's all about having that sense of control, knowing you have other options.
That's such a good point. So thinking about your upcoming negotiation, what could you do to strengthen your BTNA?
Yeah.
Are there any alternatives you can explore or leverage? It's definitely worth taking the time to really assess your options before heading into any negotiation.
Absolutely. Now, once you've got your BTNA sorted, the next thing to consider is the ZOPO, Zone of Possible Agreement.
Okay.
This is where the real magic happens.
Okay, tell me more.
It's the overlap between what you're willing to accept and what the other party is willing to give.
Okay.
Think of it as that sweet spot where a deal can actually be made.
So going back to that used car,
Okay.
let's say you're willing to pay up to $9,500, but the seller really wants $10,000. The ZOPA would be somewhere between those two numbers.
Precisely. Both sides need to understand their own ZOPA and the other party's ZOPA to find an agreement that works for everyone.
What happens if there's no overlap? What if they won't go below $10,000 and you absolutely won't go above $9,500?
That's when things get tricky. If there's no ZOPA, a successful negotiation is unlikely unless someone's BATNA shifts or they're willing to compromise more.
Which goes back to why a strong BATNA is so important.
Yes.
If you have a great alternative, you're less likely to get stuck in a situation where there's no room for agreement.
Exactly.
You have the power to walk away.
Now here's where things get even more interesting. There isn't just one type of negotiation.
Okay.
Brent breaks it down into two main categories, distributive and integrative.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Lay it on me. What's the difference?
So distributive negotiation is more about claiming value. Imagine haggling over the price of something at a market.
Okay.
You're trying to get the best deal for yourself.
Right.
Even if it means the other person gets a little less, it's a win-lose scenario.
So it's about dividing up a fixed pie.
Exactly. But then there's integrative negotiation. This is about collaborating and finding ways to expand the pie
Okay.
so that both parties benefit. It's a win-win scenario.
So instead of just dividing what's already there, you're finding creative ways to create more value.
Yes.
I like that.
And that means understanding each other's underlying interests and needs.
Right.
It's about finding solutions that address those needs, not just focusing on who gets the bigger slice of the existing pie.
So recognizing which type of negotiation you're in is crucial because it completely changes your approach. If it's distributive, you might be more assertive. But if it's integrative, you'd want to build trust and share information.
Exactly. Now, before we move on, take a moment to think about your situation. Which type of negotiation does it seem like? Is it more distributive, integrative, or maybe a blend of both?
Yeah.
Knowing this can really help you choose the right tactics.
This is all so fascinating.
Oh.
And speaking of tactics, are you ready for my favorite part? Let's talk about anchoring bias.
Ooh, anchoring bias.
That sneaky psychological trick that can totally sway a negotiation.
It really is fascinating. Anchoring bias is this tendency we have to rely too heavily on the first piece of information we receive, the anchor, when making decisions. And Brent uses a case study to illustrate this. And guess what? It's about car headlamps.
Car headlamps?
Yes. A Japanese car manufacturer needed a new headlamp supplier. Because their usual one had to shut down unexpectedly, they decided to get quotes from other suppliers.
Okay.
But here's where it gets interesting. They told each supplier that there had been a translation error with the price.
Oh.
So they should ignore the original number. However, half the suppliers saw a fake anchor price of $70 per headlamp.
Okay.
While the other half saw $70.
So even though they were told to ignore that initial number, it still had a huge impact.
Right. When asked to give their own price, those who saw the $70 anchor gave significantly higher quotes than those who saw $17.
Wow.
It just shows how powerful that first piece of information can be, even when we think we're ignoring it.
It's like setting the stage for the entire negotiation without the other side even realizing it.
That's why it's so crucial to make the first offer whenever possible.
Right.
You get to set that anchor, you frame the conversation. Of course, your offer should be reasonable and justifiable, but don't be afraid to be assertive.
So it's not just about throwing out any number, but about strategically choosing an anchor that works in your favor.
Exactly. Now, even though negotiations can get emotional, it's important to try and stay objective. Brent calls this the objectivity principle.
The objectivity principle.
It's about depersonalizing the process and focusing on logic and fairness.
So instead of getting caught up in what's good for me or what's good for you, it's about finding a solution based on what makes sense for both sides.
Right. And Brent provides some really clear examples of how to do this. One way is to use fair standards, like market value statistics or precedents.
So if you're negotiating a salary, you could research the average salary for similar roles in your industry and use that data to support your request.
Exactly. Another way is to use fair procedures like taking turns, drawing straws, or flipping a coin.
Okay.
Think about cutting a cake. One person cuts and the other chooses. This incentivizes the cutter to make the pieces as even as possible.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
It removes any bias or favoritism.
So it's about using objective measures to make sure everyone has an equal opportunity, even if the results might not be perfectly equal. It's about fairness. I like that.
And remember, never yield to pressure, only to principle.
All right. Now that we've covered BATNA types of negotiation anchoring and the objectivity principle, let's see how all of this comes together in a real-world scenario. In Brent's notes, he presents a case study about Jordan, a master's student who's juggling job offers from 2 tech companies.
Right. And this is where things get complex because it's not just about salary.
Right.
Jordan has multiple interests in play. Work-life balance, location, start date, even things like vacation time and travel expectations.
So it's a much more nuanced negotiation than just focusing on one single number.
Exactly. One company, Computech, has actually created this position specifically for Jordan.
Wow.
They don't know Jordan has another offer on the table. The other company, Innoventrix, knows about the competing offer from Computech, but doesn't know any details about the negotiations.
Wow. That definitely adds another layer of intrigue. The fact that one company knows about the other offer while the other doesn't creates such an interesting dynamic.
It really highlights how information is power in negotiation. Knowing what the other side knows or doesn't know can completely change your strategy.
Okay, before we dive into the specifics of Jordan's situation, let's pause here for a moment. Think about what you would do in Jordan's shoes. What would be your BPNA? How would you try to define the ZOPA considering all those different interests?
Remember, both companies are eager to hire Jordan, but they also have their own constraints and budgets.
Right.
This is where understanding BTNA ZOPA anchoring objectivity and choosing the right approach based on the type of negotiation all come into play.
Yeah.
It's like putting together a puzzle.
So many factors to consider. It's about taking all of these principles and figuring out how to apply them in a strategic way to get the best possible outcome. All right, ready to dig into Jordan's case and see how they navigate these complexities?
Absolutely. Let's see what happens next.
All right, we're back and ready to unpack what Jordan does next. But before we jump into the specifics of their situation, I think it's worth talking a bit more about preparation, something Brent really emphasizes in his notes.
Absolutely. Preparation is crucial for any negotiation. You wouldn't go into a big presentation or job interview without practicing, right?
Yeah.
Negotiation is no different.
Totally. Winging it rarely leads to the best outcomes. So aside from figuring out your BATNA, what else can you do to get ready?
Well, first think about your goals.
Okay.
What do you really want to achieve? And what are you willing to concede?
Right.
Then put yourself in the other party's shoes. What are their goals? What constraints might they be facing? The more information you have, the better you can anticipate their moves and prepare your responses.
It's like a game of chess. You have to think several steps ahead.
Precisely. And don't underestimate the value of practice. Role-playing with a friend or colleague can help you get comfortable, articulating your points, and responding to different scenarios.
That's a great tip. Okay, so let's go back to Jordan's case. They're negotiating with two companies, Computech and Innoventrix. Let's start with Computech. Remember, Avery Adams from Computech doesn't know about the other offer.
Right. So if you were Jordan, what would be your opening move with Computech?
Well, I think it's important for Jordan to highlight the fact that this position is being created specifically for them. That shows Computech really values their skills and experience.
That's a great point. It definitely gives Jordan some leverage. Now here's a tough question. Should Jordan reveal the other job offer to Avery?
Ooh.
It's a calculated risk.
Yeah, it could create a sense of urgency for Computech, right? Like, we need to make a good offer or we might lose Jordan.
Exactly. But it could also backfire. It might make them feel pressured or less willing to negotiate.
It's a delicate balance. If Jordan decides to reveal the offer, they need to do it strategically. Maybe casually mention it as part of a broader conversation about their career goals, not as a blatant tactic.
I agree. It's all about framing and timing. Now, shifting gears to the actual terms, what should Jordan prioritize in their negotiation with Computech?
Well, it's not just about salary, right? Jordan has all those other interests.
Right.
Work-life balance, location, start date, vacation time, the whole package.
Exactly. It's about finding the right mix.
So Jordan needs to prioritize.
Yeah.
And be willing to compromise on certain things to get what they truly value.
Yeah.
Maybe they're willing to negotiate on salary if they can get more vacation time or a flexible work arrangement.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot. And this is where remembering anchoring can be so powerful. Jordan should make the first offer setting a high but reasonable anchor for salary and benefits.
Makes sense. Okay, now let's switch gears to Innoventrix. Remember, Baylor Bell, the representative from Innoventrix, does know about the competing offer from Computech. How does this change the game?
Well, for one thing, Jordan can't use the element of surprise. Baylor might try to lowball them knowing they have another offer.
Right. But couldn't Jordan also use that knowledge to their advantage? Like, hey, I have this other offer, but I'm really excited about Innoventrix for these specific reasons.
That's a really smart approach. It shows genuine interest in Innoventrix while also subtly reminding them they have other options. It's a way to create a bit of healthy competition without being overly aggressive.
Right. But ultimately, Jordan still needs to be clear about their priorities and be prepared to walk away if Innoventrix doesn't meet their needs.
And that's where the objectivity principle we talked about earlier comes in handy.
Right.
Jordan should focus on using objective criteria to back up their requests. For example, they could research salary data for similar roles in their field and use that information to support their salary expectations.
Right. It's about taking the emotion out of it and making the case based on facts and logic, not just personal preferences.
Right.
They could even highlight their past accomplishments, maybe quantifying their contributions to previous projects or teams.
Absolutely. Showcasing their value in concrete terms can be really persuasive.
So we've covered BATNAs of a PO, different negotiation styles, anchoring, and objectivity. Any other tips you'd give our listener as they gear up for their own negotiations?
Well, one thing people often forget is the power of listening.
Oh, yeah.
Active listening can help you understand the other party's underlying motivations. What are their concerns? What are they really looking for?
It's not just about pushing your own agenda, but about understanding where the other person is coming from and finding that common ground.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Clarifying questions can help you uncover new information or challenge assumptions.
It shows you're engaged and genuinely interested in reaching a mutually beneficial agreement, not just trying to win at all costs.
No.
Okay, any other gems of wisdom before we move on?
Yes. Don't be afraid to take a break if things start to get heated or you feel stuck. A short pause can help everyone regroup and come back with a fresh perspective.
Stepping away can sometimes be the best way to move forward.
And finally, remember that negotiation is a process. It's rarely a quick fix. Be patient, be persistent, and most importantly, know when to walk away if the deal isn't right for you.
That's such an important reminder. Sometimes the best negotiation is the one you don't make.
Now, we've covered a lot of ground, but there's one final piece of Brent's notes we haven't touched on yet: the strategic use of questions. And that's what we'll dive into in part 3.
All right, we're back for the final part of our negotiation deep dive. And you know what they say, save the best for last. We're about to uncover the strategic power of questions.
Yes, questions aren't just about gathering information.
Right.
They can be used to shift the power dynamic, reframe the conversation, even influence how the other person thinks.
It's like having a secret weapon in your negotiation toolkit. So how can we use questions to our advantage?
Let's start with open-ended questions.
Okay.
These can't be answered with a simple yes or no.
Right.
They encourage the other side to elaborate and share more of their perspective.
Okay.
Which can often reveal some really valuable insights.
So instead of asking Computech, are you willing to negotiate on salary?
Right.
Jordan could ask, what flexibility do you have in the budget for this position?
Exactly. That's so much more effective. It invites a more detailed response and might uncover options Jordan hadn't even considered.
Okay, I'm seeing how powerful this can be. Now, what about leading questions?
Yeah.
I remember reading about those in Brent's notes.
Leading questions subtly guide the other person toward a certain answer. For example, instead of asking Innoventrix, can you offer a higher salary?
Right.
Jordan could say, I'm really impressed with the company's commitment to work-life balance. How does that translate into the compensation package for this role?
That's brilliant. It links work-life balance to salary without being confrontational. It suggests that if a company values the former, they should also offer a competitive salary.
Exactly. It plants that seed without being aggressive. Now, sometimes you need to challenge assumptions or push back a bit. That's where clarifying questions come in handy.
So if Computech offers Jordan a lower salary than expected,
Yeah.
instead of just saying no, they could ask, how did you arrive at that salary figure? Or what factors were considered when determining the compensation for this role?
Yes, those questions force Computech to justify their offer and might reveal their thinking, giving Jordan more leverage to negotiate.
It's all about being strategic and thoughtful with your questions, like a delicate dance.
It is, and sometimes the best move is to not say anything at all. Silence can be incredibly powerful.
You mean like just pausing after they make an offer?
Exactly. That pause creates a sense of anticipation and can often encourage them to fill the silence, potentially revealing more than they intended.
It's about using those nonverbal cues strategically. I love it. So much can be communicated without even saying a word.
Now, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought-provoking question.
Okay, I'm ready.
Think about your upcoming negotiation. What's the most powerful question you could ask to shift the dynamic in your favor?
That's a fantastic question to ponder. And remember, negotiation is a skill. You can always improve. Every interaction is a chance to practice and become more confident and persuasive.
So go out there, embrace those conversations, and remember the power of a well-crafted question.
You got it. And if you ever need a refresher on all these brilliant tactics, you know where to find us. Happy negotiating.